The concrete floor rushed up to meet me faster than I could scream. A second ago, I was standing on the scaffolding of our new distribution center, screaming at my brother Julian about the $3 million missing from the construction fund. He didn't argue. He didn't make an excuse. He just looked at me with those cold, empty eyes, the eyes of a man who had never been told no in his entire life, and shoved me hard against the chest. I remember the feeling of the safety rail snapping, a bolt I had told him to fix weeks ago. Gravity took over, and my stomach dropped into my throat. I hit the ground with a sickening crunch that vibrated through my entire skeleton. Pain, white-hot and blinding, exploded in my legs, but the worst part wasn't the agony. It was looking up through my blurred vision and seeing Julian peering over the edge. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't reaching for his phone to call 911. He was just watching, checking his watch, waiting for me to stop moving. That was the moment I realized my brother hadn't just made a mistake. He had tried to execute me. As the darkness swallowed me whole, my last thought was a promise. If I survive this, I will destroy him. If you think family should always come first, hit the like button. If you think betrayal deserves punishment, subscribe. Let's see who is on the right side of history. I woke up to the rhythmic beeping of machines and the smell of antiseptic. My body felt heavy, like it was encased in concrete, and when I tried to move my legs, nothing happened. Panic surged through my chest, but before I could call for a nurse, a uniformed police officer stepped into my line of sight. He didn't look sympathetic. He looked like he was staring at a criminal. He read me my rights before he even asked how I was feeling. "We have a witness statement claiming you were distraught over financial irregularities you caused," the officer said, his voice monotone. "Your brother told us you jumped. He said you couldn't live with the guilt of embezzling company funds." My jaw dropped, but no sound came out. My throat was too dry, my heart too weak. Julian hadn't just tried to kill me. He had used the time I spent in surgery to rewrite history. He had taken his own crimes, the theft, the gambling debts, the fraud, and pinned them on the guy lying in a hospital bed with shattered legs. 2 days later, my parents finally walked into the room. I expected tears. I expected outrage on my behalf. I expected my mother to hold my hand and my father to demand justice. Instead, they stood at the foot of the bed like strangers, attending a funeral for someone they didn't like. My father wouldn't even meet my eyes. He stared at the floor, wringing his hands, while my mother looked at me with a mix of pity and disappointment. "We know about the money, Liam," my father said softly. "Julian showed us the transfers." I tried to sit up, shouting that Julian had forged them, that I was the one who built this company while Julian partied, but my mother cut me off. "Stop it," she hissed, her voice trembling. "Don't make this harder. We have a reputation to uphold. If this goes to trial, the stock will tank. We can't let that happen." That was the dagger in my heart. They didn't care about the truth. They cared about the stock price. They were choosing the golden child, the liar, over the son who had sacrificed everything for them. They were complicit. The lawyer they hired for me wasn't there to defend me. He was there to process me. He laid it out simply. I could go to trial, fight a long, expensive battle from a wheelchair against my own family's resources, and likely lose because Julian had destroyed the real evidence. Or I could sign a plea deal, admit to a lesser charge of fraud, take a short sentence, and agree to a restraining order that kept me away from the company and the family. "It's the best option," the lawyer said, sliding the pen toward my paralyzed hand. "Your parents are willing to keep this quiet if you sign. They just want you to get help." I looked at the paper. It was a confession to a crime I didn't commit. Signing it meant losing my freedom, my name, and the 15 years of blood and sweat I poured into the business. But I was broken, physically and mentally. I had no money, no allies, and no legs to stand on. With a shaking hand, I signed my life away. I watched the lawyer smile, pack his briefcase, and leave me to rot. Prison is a brutal place, but for a cripple, it's a nightmare. I spent the first 6 months in the infirmary, learning how to exist in a body that wouldn't cooperate. The physical therapy was agonizing. Every step felt like walking on glass shards, but the physical pain was a distraction from the rage.
That rage became my fuel. I stopped feeling sorry for myself and started getting angry. Real, focused, cold anger. I didn't waste my time in the yard or playing cards. I spent every waking hour in the prison library. I devoured books on corporate law, forensic accounting, and high-level finance. I studied the specific type of loopholes Julian used to hide his theft. I turned my cell into a war room, mapping out the structure of the family empire I had built. I knew Julian better than anyone. I knew he was lazy. I knew he was arrogant. And I knew that without me there to fix his mistakes, he would start drowning. I just needed to be patient enough to wait for the water to rise.
3 years later, the heavy steel gates buzzed open, and I wheeled myself out into the gray morning light. There was no car waiting for me, no family to welcome me home, just the cold wind and a bus ticket the state provided. I was 32 years old, a convicted felon, and legally disabled. To the world, I was garbage, but inside, I was sharper than I had ever been. I moved into a cramped, moldy stadio apartment in the worst part of the city. It was a far cry from the penthouse I used to own, but it was mine. I started my rehabilitation with obsessive discipline. I pushed my body to its absolute limit, sweating and screaming in that tiny room until I could stand for 10 seconds, then 20, then a minute. I got a cane, a cheap, ugly metal thing, but it was enough. I walked with a limp, dragging my left leg, but I was walking. I was no longer the helpless victim in the hospital bed. I was a ghost, and it was time to haunt the people who buried me. I couldn't get a job in finance with my record, so I aimed lower but smarter. I took a night janitor position at Vanguard Holdings, a direct rival to my family's firm. It was humiliating. I used to negotiate million-dollar mergers. Now I was scrubbing toilets for junior analysts. But I wasn't just cleaning. I was listening. I made myself invisible. I wore my cap low, limped quietly, and became a fly on the wall. For 3 months, I collected shredded documents from the bins. I listened to late-night phone calls. I wasn't just looking for any opportunity. I was looking for the opportunity. I focused on Marcus, a senior partner known for being brilliant but desperate for a promotion. I knew he was looking for a whale acquisition to secure his legacy. I knew this because I pieced together his shredded drafts. I wasn't just a janitor. I was an auditor in a jumpsuit. One night, while emptying a bin in the break room, I saw the news on the TV mounted in the corner. It was a gala event. There was Julian, wearing a tuxedo, smiling that dazzling fake smile, with our parents beaming beside him. The chyron read, "Sterling Logistics CEO promises record growth." I gripped the mop handle so hard my knuckles turned white. He looked perfect, untouched. He was living my life, spending my money, and getting praised for it. But I noticed something else in the footage, a slight twitch in his eye, a nervous sweat on his brow. He was terrified. The cracks were forming. I went back to the library computers that night and accessed the public financial records of Sterling Logistics again. It confirmed what I suspected. Julian was running a Ponzi scheme with our own company. He was borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. I realized I didn't need a gun or a lawyer to destroy him. I just needed to introduce his debt to a predator. The next night, I made my move. Marcus was in his office, slamming his phone down, clearly frustrated. He was losing a deal. I didn't empty his trash. I locked the door behind me and limped towards his desk. He looked up, startled. "What do you think you're doing? Get out." I didn't speak. I dropped a thick manila envelope onto his desk. It wasn't trash. It was a 60-page forensic analysis I had spent weeks compiling by hand. "Sterling Logistics isn't growing," I said, my voice raspy but steady. "They are bleeding. Julian Sterling is hiding distinct losses in subsidiary accounts. I've highlighted the discrepancies in red." Marcus stared at the envelope, then at me. "Who are you?" he asked, skeptical. "I'm the guy who knows where the bodies are buried, because I'm the one who dug the graves," I replied. "Read page 4. If the math is wrong, call security. If it's right, we make a deal." Marcus didn't call security. He read page 4, then page 10, then the whole thing. The skepticism on his face vanished, replaced by the greedy look of a shark smelling blood. He realized that the janitor had just handed him a hostile takeover strategy worth millions.
He didn't ask about my past or my prison record. In high finance, profit washes away all sins. We struck a deal that night. He set me up as an external consultant under a shell company, Phoenix Capital. I would be the brain, he would be the face. We began a quiet, aggressive campaign to buy up Sterling Logistics debt from banks that were already nervous about Julian's erratic leadership. It wasn't luck, it was a surgical operation. Within 4 months, we held 60% of the company's debt. Julian had no idea I was involved. He thought he was just having bad luck with the banks. He didn't realize he was being hunted by the brother he tried to kill. The trap is set. Before we spring it, tell me in the comments, what's the best way to deal with a toxic family member? Cut them off or take them down?
The pressure on Julian was mounting. I could see it in the frantic emails he was sending to creditors, emails I now had access to because we were the creditors. He was begging for time. He was liquidating personal assets to make payroll. The gambling debts he had hidden were resurfacing, and loan sharks were likely breathing down his neck too. I decided it was time to turn up the heat. I instructed Marcus to freeze the credit lines. No more extensions, no more grace periods. We demanded a full repayment of a $5 million bridge loan within 48 hours, knowing full well Julian didn't have the cash. This was the squeeze. I sat in my small apartment, eating instant noodles, imagining the panic in the Sterling household. My parents would be terrified of losing their mansion. Julian would be sweating through his expensive suits. They were finally feeling a fraction of the helplessness I felt in that hospital bed. Desperation makes people stupid, and Julian was already halfway there. When the deadline hit, we offered him a lifeline. My shell company, Phoenix Capital, offered to refinance his entire debt package. The catch? The terms were brutal. High interest, full oversight of the board, and a personal guarantee clause that staked all executive personal assets against the loan. If Julian signed, he got the cash to survive another year. If he defaulted, Phoenix Capital could seize everything: the company, the houses, the cars, even their retirement accounts. It was a trap wrapped in a gift box. I waited by the phone, my heart pounding against my ribs. It took less than an hour. Marcus called me, laughing. He signed it, Liam. He didn't even have a lawyer review the fine print. He was just so happy to get the check. The trap was shut. With the deal signed, I legally owned them, but I wasn't ready to pull the trigger yet. I wanted them to know it was me. I wanted to see the look on their faces when the ghost walked back into the room. As the new majority lender, Phoenix Capital had the right to call an emergency board meeting to discuss restructuring. I demanded the meeting be held in person at the Sterling headquarters, the same building where I had spent 15 years working 18-hour days, the same building I was banned from. I went to a tailor and spent nearly all my savings on a custom suit. It had to be perfect. I shaved my beard, polished my cane, and looked in the mirror. The man looking back wasn't the broken convict. He was a shark I was ready to feed. Before the meeting, I reached out to Elena, my old executive assistant. She was the only one who had tried to visit me in prison, but my parents had blocked her. I met her at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office. When she saw me, she burst into tears. She told me how bad things had gotten, how Julian screamed at employees, how he fired people for his own mistakes, how the company culture was toxic. She handed me a USB drive. I kept records, she whispered, looking over her shoulder. Emails, voice memos, altered ledgers. I knew you didn't steal that money, Liam. I was just waiting for you to come back. I held the drive in my hand, feeling the weight of it. This was the nail in the coffin. Not only did I own their debt, but I now had proof of the original frame job. I had everything I needed to send Julian to the cell I had just vacated. The day of the meeting arrived. It was raining, a gray, gloomy day that matched the mood inside Sterling Logistics. I pulled up to the building in a black sedan Marcus had hired for me. I watched the employees walking in, heads down, looking miserable. This used to be a place of innovation and energy. Now it was a graveyard. I walked past the security desk. The guard, a new guy, moved to stop me. "Sir, do you have an appointment?" I didn't stop walking. I just flashed the legal documents stamped with the Phoenix Capital seal. "I own the building," I said, my voice steady. He stepped back, confused, letting me pass. I took the elevator to the top floor, the numbers climbing higher, my heart rate steady. The doors opened to the executive suite. I could hear Julian's voice from the boardroom, loud and arrogant, boasting about how he had secured new funding. He had no idea the executioner was walking down the hall. I pushed open the heavy oak doors of the boardroom. The conversation died instantly. 12 heads turned toward me. At the head of the table sat Julian, frozen mid-laugh. To his right were my parents. My mother dropped her tablet on the table with a clatter. My father's face went pale, draining of all blood. For a solid 10 seconds, the only sound was the rhythmic tap, tap, tap of my cane on the hardwood floor as I walked to the empty seat at the opposite end of the table. "You can't be here," Julian finally stammered, his voice cracking. "Security, get him out. There's a restraining order." I didn't yell. I didn't rage. I just pulled out the chair and sat down, resting my cane against the table. "The restraining order applies to Liam Sterling, the former employee," I said calmly. "I am here representing Phoenix Capital, the owner of your debt. Sit down, Julian." The silence was deafening. The other board members, old friends of the family who had watched me grow up and then watched me go to prison, looked between me and Julian in shock. My mother found her voice first. "Liam, we thought you were gone." She tried to sound motherly, but her eyes were darting to the legal papers in front of me. "I was gone," I replied, cold as ice. "I was in a cage where you put me. But I had a lot of time to read, specifically to read your financial statements." I slid the folder across the polished wood. "You're bankrupt, Julian. You've defaulted on the covenants of the loan you signed last week. You are insolvent." Julian stood up, his face turning red. "That's a lie. We have the cash." "No," I corrected him. "You had the cash. Then you transferred $2 million to an offshore account in the Caymans yesterday. That's a violation of the agreement, which means the loan is due, in full, now." Julian looked like a trapped animal. He looked at our parents, desperate for them to save him, but they were paralyzed. "We can work this out," my father stammered, trying to regain control. "Liam, please, we're family. We can make you a partner again. We can fix this." I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound that made everyone flinch. "Family? You watched your son break my legs, and then you helped him frame me. You let me rot for 3 years to save your stock price." I pulled out the USB drive Elena had given me, and just so everyone here knows exactly who they are in business with, I plugged it into the presentation laptop. Julian lunged for me, scrambling over the table, but the security guards, who realized the power had shifted, held him back. The evidence is about to drop. Hit the like button if you've been waiting for this moment since the beginning of this story. The recording played over the boardroom speakers. It was clear as day. Julian's voice, bragging to his bookie on the phone about how he handled the problem with me. "I pushed him, Tony. He's out of the way. The money is yours." Then the emails flashed on the screen. The forged transfers, the time-stamped evidence proving Julian was the one stealing the funds. The board members were gasping. My mother was sobbing into her hands. My father looked like he was having a heart attack. Julian stopped fighting the guards and just slumped, defeated. The truth was out. The lie they had maintained for years had shattered in less than 5 minutes. I looked at the board members. "I am calling for an immediate vote to remove the CEO and the chairman for gross misconduct and criminal fraud." Every single hand went up, even the ones who were Julian's drinking buddies. "You can't do this," Julian screamed as the guards hauled him toward the door. "I am the company." "You are nothing," I said, not even looking at him. "You are a thief who got caught." As he was dragged out, I turned my attention to my parents. They were still sitting there, trembling. "And now for the collateral," I said, opening the second file. "The personal guarantee clause." My father looked up, tears in his eyes. "Liam, the house? Your mother's car?" "Everything," I said. "The loan covers all assets. You signed it, Dad. You taught me to always read the contract." I watched the realization hit them. They weren't just losing the business. They were losing their status. They would be homeless, bankrupt, and humiliated. The exact same fate they had forced on me. The next hour was a blur of lawyers and accountants. I systematically stripped the Sterling name from the company. I fired the executive team that had enabled Julian. I seized the accounts. By noon, I was the sole decision-maker of the empire I had built, lost, and reconquered. My parents waited in the lobby, refusing to leave. When I finally walked out, they rushed to me. "Liam, please," my mother begged, grabbing my arm. "Where are we supposed to go? We have nowhere." I looked at her hand on my sleeve. the same hand that had signed the statement condemning me to prison. I gently removed it. "I hear the state shelters are open until 8 p.m., I said. "They helped me when I got out. Maybe they can help you." I didn't stop there. I handed the USB drive to the police. This time, they couldn't ignore it. The evidence of attempted murder and fraud was irrefutable. Julian was arrested at the airport trying to flee the country. The news footage showed him in handcuffs, crying, looking nothing like the confident tycoon he pretended to be. My parents were indicted as accessories after the fact. They avoided prison due to their age, but their reputation was incinerated. They lost their country club memberships, their friends, and their pride. They moved into a small, rented apartment in a bad neighborhood, living off Social Security. I never visited them. I never called. They had made their choice years ago, and now they had to live with it. A month later, I visited Julian in the county jail. He sat behind the glass, looking thin and pale. He picked up the phone, his hands shaking. "Are you happy?" he spat. "You ruined everything. You destroyed the legacy." "I didn't destroy it," I replied calmly. "I liquidated it." His eyes widened. "What?" "I sold the company," I told him. "I sold the parts, the real estate, the client list. Sterling Logistics doesn't exist anymore. I erased it." The look of horror on his face was worth everything. He cared more about the name than his own freedom. "Why?" he whispered. "Because it was poisoned," I said. "It was built on lies. I'm building something new now, something that has nothing to do with you." I walked out of the jail and into the sunshine. I felt lighter than I had in years. The cane was still in my hand, and the limp would always be there, but the pain was gone. I had sold the company assets for over $40 million. I kept enough to live comfortably for 10 lifetimes and donated a massive chunk to legal aid funds for wrongfully convicted prisoners. I bought a small house by the ocean, far away from the city, far away from the memories of concrete and betrayal. I spent my days reading, swimming, and learning to trust again. I met a woman named Sarah, a teacher who didn't know who I was or how much money I had. She just liked that I was a good listener. For the first time in my life, I was loved for me, not for what I could provide. Sometimes, late at night, I look at the scars on my legs. They are ugly, jagged maps of the violence I endured, but I don't hide them anymore. They are reminders that I survived. My brother wanted to kill me for an empire, but he ended up with a cage. My parents wanted to save a reputation, but they ended up with shame. I learned the hard way that blood doesn't make you family. Loyalty does. And sometimes, the only way to heal is to cut off the limb that's rotting, even if it's your own flesh and blood. I didn't just get revenge, I got peace. And looking out at the endless blue ocean, I realized that was the only empire worth having. If you made it this far, you are part of the family now. Please subscribe for more stories of justice. And always remember, trust is earned, not given. Thanks for watching.